5.5, 5.5, 5, 5, 5.
5, 4.5, 5, 5, 5.
Swara, inward dive piked.
Sophie, back dive piked, 7.5 meters.
Six and a half, 5.5, 5.5, 5, 6.
7, 6, 5.5, 6, 5.5.
Orla, inward dive piked.
Round 3 on platform. Chloe, reverse dive piked, 7.5 meters.
Four and a half, 5, 5, 5, 4.5.
7, 7, 7, 7, 7.
Betsy, inward dive piked.
Isabel, back dive piked, 7.5 meters.
Four and a half, 4, 5, 4, 5. Jared, back dive piked.
4.5, 5, 5, 4.5, 5. Damani, arm stand somersault piked, 7.5 meters.
4.5, 5.5, 5, 5, 5.5. Kai, reverse dive piked. 5, 5, 5, 5.5, 5. Rupert, forward dive piked.
6.5, 7, 5.5, 6, 6.5. Scarlett, forward 1.5 somersaults piked, 10 meters.
6, 6, 6, 5, 6. Bow, back dive piked.
6, 5, 4.5, 4, 5.5. Abby, back dive piked, 7.5 meters.
4.5, 4.5, 5, 4.5, 5.5. Hunter, back dive with tuck.
4.5, 4.5, 5, 5.5, 5. Delphina, back dive piked, 5 meters.
6, 5, 5.5, 5, 4.5. Sam, inward dive piked.
5.5, 5.5, 5.5, 6, 6. Emma, back dive piked, 5 meters.
6, 5, 5.5, 5.5, 5.5. Alfie, back dive piked.
5.5, 5.5, 4.5, 5.5, 4.5. Claire, reverse dive pike, 7.5 meters.
Four and a half, four, four and a half, four and a half, four. Alex, back dive piked.
Seven, 6.5, 6, 6.5, 6. Anna, reverse dive piked, 7.5 meters.
Six, six, 5.5, 6, 5. Zachary, reverse dive piked.
6.5, 6.5, 5.5, 6.5, 5.5. Sophia, back dive piked, 10 meters.
5, 5, 4.5, 5.5, 5. Jared, forward 1.5 somersaults piked.
You having to look through her?
Yes.
Right. If we just moved it a little bit, we'd be all right, wouldn't it?
7, 7, 6, 6, 5.5.
5.5, 5.5, 5, 5.5, 5.
Kai, forward 1.5 somersaults piked.
Delphina, back 1.5 somersaults, half twist, free position, 5 meters.
6, 5.5, 5.5, 5.5, 6. Rupert, back dive with tuck.
5.5, 4.5, 6, 5.5, 5.5. Emma, reverse dive piked, 5 meters.
5, 5, 5, 5, 5. Bo, reverse dive with tuck.
5.5, 5, 5.5, 5, 4.5. Claire, back 1.5 somersaults, half twist, free position, 7.5 meters.
5.5, 5, 6, 5, 6. Hunter, reverse dive with tuck.
5.5, 6, 3.5, 4.5, 5.5.
6, 5.5, 6, 5, 5.5.
Anna, arm stand somersault, piked, 7.5 meters.
Sam, back dive with tuck. 5.5, 5.5, 5.5, 6, 5.
6.5, 7, 5.5, 7.5, 6.5.
Alfie, reverse dive piked.
Sophia, reverse dive, piked, 7.5 meters.
5, 5, 5.5, 5.5, 5.5.
4.5, 5, 5, 5, 5.
Alex, reverse dive with tuck.
Tegan, reverse dive, piked, 5 meters.
5, 5, 5, 5, 4.5. Zachary, inward 1.5 somersaults with tuck.
7, 6.5, 6, 6.5, 6.5. Rose, back dive, piked, 5.
77666. Blake, reverse dive with tuck.
5, 6, 6, 5.5, 5.5. Maddie, inward 1.5 somersaults, piked 5 meters.
5.5, 5.5, 6, 5, 5.5. Seth, back 1.5 somersaults with tuck.
4.5, 4.5, 5, 5, 5.5. Imogen, reverse dive, piked 7.5 meters.
5.5, 5.5, 4.5, 5.5, 5. And on to round 4 on 1 meter. Claudia, inward 1.5 somersaults with tuck.
5, 5, 5, 4, 5.5. Erin, reverse dive, piked 7.5 meters.
4, 3, 3, 4, 3.5. Beth, forward 1.5 somersaults piked.
5.5, 5, 5, 4.5, 5. Quinn, back 1.5 somersaults, half twist, free position, 7.5 meters.
7, 6, 5, 5.5, 5. Gaia, reverse dive with tuck.
4, 4, 4.5, 5, 5. Tilly, reverse dive, piked 7.5 meters.
5.5, 5.5, 5, 5.5, 5. Flo, back 1.5 somersaults with tuck.
Someone over there called her Gaia, not Gaia.
Oh, did you?
Yeah.
Oh.
6, 6, 5.5, 6, 5.5. Sky, back 1.5 somersaults, half twist, free position, 5 meters.
No one Sheffield over here, so I can't ask them.
5, 6, 5, 5, 6. Sophie, inward 1.5 somersaults, piked 5 meters.
'If you could just hold 1 meter, please, for a second.
5.5, 7.5, 6, 7, 6.5. Round 5 on platform. Chloe, forward 2.5 somersaults, piked 7.5 meters. 5.5, 6, 5.5, 6.5, 5.5. Isabel, forward 2.5 somersaults with tuck, 7.5 meters.
I shall announce Flo's scores: 5.5, 5.5, 5.5, 6.5, 5.5. Daisy, forward 1.5 somersaults, piked.
Four, 3.5, 4, 5, 3.5. Damani, back 2.5 somersaults, half twist, piked, 10 meters.
3.5, 4, 3.5, 4, 4. Ema, inward 1.5 somersaults with tuck. Four and a half, 5, 4.5, 5.5, 4.5.
4, 3, 3.5, 4.5, 4.
Alexa, forward double somersault with tuck.
Scarlett, arm stand, double somersault, piked, 10 meters.
Five and a half, 4, 4.5, 5, 5.
4.5, 3.5, 3.5, 3, 3.
Olivia, forward 1.5 somersaults, piked.
Abby, forward 1.5 somersaults, 1 twist, free position, 5 meters.
Six, 5, 4.5, 5.5, 5. Lydia, reverse dive, piked.
3.5, 3.5, 4, 5, 5. Delphina, back 1.5 somersaults, 1.5 twists, free position, 5 meters.
Four and a half, 3, 4.5, 4, 4. Ayla, forward 1.5 somersaults, piked.
2, 2.5, 2.5, 2, 3.5. Emma, forward 1.5 somersaults, piked, 7.5 meters.
7, 6, 6, 5.5, 5.5. Lily, forward 1.5 somersaults, piked.
6, 5, 4.5, 4, 5.5. Claire, back 2.5 somersaults with tuck, 7.5 meters.
5.5, 4.5, 5.5, 4.5, 5. Libby, forward 1.5 somersaults with tuck.
5, 5, 4, 5.5, 4.5.
5, 5.5, 6, 6, 4.5.
Anna, forward 1.5 somersaults, 1 twist, free position, 5 meters.
Swara, inward 1.5 somersaults with tuck.
5, 5, 5, 5.5, 6. Sophia, forward 2.5 somersaults, piked, 7.5 meters.
6, 5, 4.5, 5.5, 5.5. Orla, forward 1.5 somersaults, piked.
Two, 2.5, 2, 4, 3.5.
5, 6, 5, 6, 5.5.
Tegan, inward 1.5 somersaults, piked 5 meters.
Betsy, forward 1.5 somersaults, piked. Six, 5.5, 6, 5, 5.5.
5, 5.5, 5, 6, 5.5.
Jared, inward 1.5 somersaults with tuck.
Rose, inward 1.5 somersaults with tuck, 5 meters.
Five and a half, 6, 7, 6, 6.5.
4, 5, 4, 5, 5.
Kai, back 1.5 somersaults with tuck.
Maddie, back 1.5 somersaults, half twist, free position, 5 meters. Five and a half, 6, 5, 5.5, 6.
5.5, 5, 4.5, 4.5, 5.
Imogen, forward 2.5 somersaults, piked 7.5 meters.
Rupert, reverse dive with tuck. Five and a half, 5, 5, 4.5, 4.5. Bow, forward 1.5 somersaults, piked.
Four, 4, 4, 5.5, 5.
6, 6, 5.5, 6, 6.
Erin, forward 2.5 somersaults, piked 10 meters.
Hunter, forward 1.5 somersaults, piked.
Six, 6, 5, 6, 4.5.
6.5, 6, 6, 6, 6.5.
Quinn, back 1.5 somersaults with tuck, 5 meters.
Sam, forward 1.5 somersaults, piked. Four and a half, 3.5, 4.5, 4, 4.5. Alfie, inward 1.5 somersaults with tuck.
5, 5, 5.5, 6, 5. Tilly, forward, inward 2.5 somersaults with tuck, 7.5 meters.
Five, 5, 4.5, 5, 5.
5, 5, 5, 6, 5.
Alex, forward 1.5 somersaults, piked.
Sky, forward 2.5 somersaults, piked 7.5 meters.
Six and a half, 5, 5.5, 5, 6. Zachary, back 1.5 somersaults with tuck.
Five and a half, 5, 5.5, 5, 5.5. Sophie, forward 2.5 somersaults, piked 7.5 meters.
Six, 5.5, 5.5, 5.5, 6. Blake, forward 1.5 somersaults, piked.
6, 6.5, 6, 6, 6. Round 6 on platform. Chloe, inward 2.5 somersaults with tuck, 7.5 meters.
6.5, 6.5, 6.5, 5.5, 5.5. Seth, inward 1.5 somersaults with tuck.
3, 3, 2.5, 3, 2.5. Isabel, inward 1.5 somersaults with tuck, 5 meters.
4, 4, 3, 3.5, 3. And your fifth and final round, Claudia Gibb, Edinburgh Diving Club, forward double somersault with tuck.
3.5, 4, 4, 4, 4.5. Dimani, forward 2.5 somersaults, piked 7.5 meters.
4, 4, 4, 3.5, 4. Beth Moxon, City of Sheffield Diving Club, inward 1.5 somersaults with tuck.
4.5, 5, 5, 5.5, 5.5. Scarlett, inward 2.5 somersaults with tuck, 7.5 meters.
7, 7, 6.5, 7.5, 6.5. Gaia, City of Sheffield Diving Club, forward 1.5 somersaults with tuck.
3, 2.5, 3, 3, 3.5. Abby, back 1.5 somersaults, piked 5 meters.
4, 4, 4, 4, 4. Flo Hall, City of Leeds Diving Club, reverse 1.5 somersaults with tuck.
4, 3.5, 3.5, 4, 4. Delphina, forward 2.5 somersaults with tuck, 5 meters.
5, 4.5, 4.5, 5, 5.5. Daisy Costello, City of Leeds Diving Club, inward 1.5 somersaults with tuck.
5, 5.5, 5.5, 6, 5.5. Emma, inward 1.5 somersaults with tuck, 5 meters.
Five, 5, 4, 5, 3.5. Ema Satherley, City of Sheffield Diving Club, back 1.5 somersaults with tuck.
5.5, 5, 5.5, 5, 5. Claire, forward 2.5 somersaults piked, 10 meters.
Three, 4, 3, 3.5, 3.5.
5.5, 6, 5, 5, 5.
Alexa Cooper, Darlington ASC, inward 1.5 somersaults with tuck.
Anna, forward 2.5 somersaults piked, 7.5 meters.
Six and a half, 6, 5.5, 6, 6.
4, 4, 3.5, 5, 4.
Olivia Loney, City of Leeds Diving Club, inward 1.5 somersaults with tuck.
Sophia, back 1.5 somersaults with tuck, 5 meters.
Five, 5, 5, 4.5, 5. Lydia Wade, City of Leeds Diving Club, inward 1.5 somersaults with tuck.
3.5, 4, 4.5, 4.5, 3.5. Tegan, back 1.5 somersaults piked, 5 meters.
Seven and a half, 6.5, 6, 6.5, 6.
5, 4.5, 4.5, 4, 4.5.
Ayla Jackson, City of Sheffield Diving Club, inward 1.5 somersaults with tuck.
Rose, back 1.5 somersaults, half twist, free position, 5 meters.
Seven, 6, 6, 6.5, 5.5. Lily Huzago, Star Diving Club Guildford, inward 1.5 somersaults with tuck.
2, 5, 4, 5, 4. Maddie, forward 2.5 somersaults piked, 7.5 meters.
Seven, 6.5, 5.5, 6.5, 6.
5, 4, 3.5, 4.5, 5.
Libby Edelson, Star Diving Club Guildford, inward 1.5 somersaults with tuck.
Imogen, inward 1.5 somersaults piked, 5 meters.
Four, 4, 4, 3, 3.5. Swara Suryavanshi, City of Leeds Diving Club, back 1.5 somersaults with tuck.
5, 6, 3.5, 4, 4.5. Erin, back 2.5 somersaults, half twist, piked 10 meters.
Three, 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 3.5. All again fought. City of Leeds Diving Club, inward 1.5 somersaults with tuck.
4, 3.5, 4, 4, 3.5. Quinn, arm stand somersault, piked 10 meters.
Four, four, 4.5, 4, 3.5. Betsy Crossley, City of Leeds Diving Club, inward 1.5 somersaults with tuck.
Five, 5.5, 5, 4, 5. Tilly, forward 2.5 somersaults with tuck 5 meters.
5, 4.5, 5.5, 4.5, 4.5. Jared Hull, Dive London Aquatics Club, forward double somersault with tuck.
4, 4, 3.5, 4, 3. Sky, arm stand somersault, piked 7.5 meters.
5.5, 3.5, 5.5, 5.5, 5.5. Kai Tobin, Southwest London Diving Club, inward 1.5 somersaults with tuck.
4.5, 5, 5, 4.5, 4.5. Sophie, inward 2.5 somersaults with tuck 7.5 meters.
6.5, 6, 6, 6, 5.5. Rupert Kelly, City of Sheffield Diving Club, forward 1.5 somersaults piked.
4.5, 5, 5, 5.5, 5.5.
6, 7, 6, 5.5, 6.
And we're on to the final round on platform. Chloe Strutt, City of Sheffield Diving Club. Forward 1.5 somersaults, 1 twist, free position 5 meters.
Bo Barry, Southend Diving, inward 1.5 somersaults with tuck.
4, 5, 5, 5.5, 5. Isabel Geary, Southampton Diving Academy. Forward 1.5 somersaults, 1 twist, free position 7.5 meters.
3.5, 3, 4.5, 3, 1.5. Hunter Mapstone, Southampton Diving Academy, inward 1.5 somersaults with tuck.
5.5, 6, 5.5, 5.5, 6. Damani Washington Scott, City of Sheffield Diving Club, inward 2.5 somersaults with tuck 7.5 meters.
5.5, 6.5, 6, 5, 6. Sam Baker, City of Leeds Diving Club, inward 1.5 somersaults with tuck.
I think I tried to be sure, but it's not going 5.5, 6.5. And a half.
And a half.
5.5.
6, 6, 5, 5, 5. Alfie O'Donnell, Edinburgh Diving Club, forward double somersault with tuck.
6, 5.5, 5, 5, 5. Scarlett Hallam, Decorum Diving Club, forward 2.5 somersaults piked, 7.5 meters. Six, 6.5, 5, 6.5, 6.
3, 1.5, 3.5, 2.5, 3.
Abby Hindle, City of Bradford Esprit Diving, forward 2.5 somersaults piked, 7.5 meters.
Alex Christian, City of Sheffield Diving Club, inward 1.5 somersaults with tuck. Khashoggi.
2, 1.5, 2, 3, 2.5.
6, 5.5, 5, 5.5, 5.
Delphina Thomas, Tunbridge Wells Diving Club, inward 2.5 somersaults with tuck, 7.5 meters.
Zachary Khashoggi, Edinburgh Diving Club, forward double somersault with tuck. Three and a half, 3, 3.5, 3.5, 4.
5, 5, 5, 4.5, 4.5.
Blake Scroxton, Southend Diving, inward 1.5 somersaults with tuck.
Emma Buckley, Amersham Swimming Club, armstand somersault piked, 7.5 meters.
6.5, 6, 6.5, 6.5, 6. Seth Greentree, Plymouth Diving Club, forward double somersault with tuck.
1.5, 2, 1.5, 2.5, 2. Claire Kettler, Dive London Aquatics Club, back 1.5 somersaults, 1.5 twists, free position, 7.5 meters.
5, 5, 4, 4, 5.5. And that concludes our female Group D 1 metre and open Group D 1 metre competition. Thank you, divers, coaches, team manager, officials, and that we will have those results with you shortly.
Six, 6.5, 6, 5.5, 6. Anna Duthie, Aberdeen Diving Club, inward 1.5 somersaults piked, 5 meters. 5.5, 6, 5, 6.5, 6. Sophia West, Edinburgh Diving Club, forward 1.5 somersaults, 1 twist, free position, 5 meters. 3.5, 2.5, 2, 1, 3. Tegan Fuchs, Star Diving Club, Guildford. Forward 2.5 somersaults with tuck 5 meters. Six, 5, 5, 5, 5. Rose McCabe, Plymouth Diving Club. Back 1.5 somersaults with tuck 5 meters. Three, 4.5, 3.5, 2, 3.5. Maddie Elliott, Plymouth Diving Club. Inward 2.5 somersaults, piked 10 meters. Five and a half, 4.5, 4.5, 4.5, 5.5. Imogen Fitzsimmons, Southampton Diving Academy. Back 1.5 somersaults with tuck 5 meters. Five, 7, 7, 7.5, 6.5. Erin Healy, Plymouth Diving Club. Inward 2.5 somersaults with tuck 7.5 meters. Two and a half, 2, 1, 1.5, 2. Quinn Kettler, Dive London Aquatics Club. Inward 1.5 somersaults with tuck 5 meters. 5, 5, 5, 4.5, 4.5. Tilly Rollinson, Decorum Diving Club, arm stand somersault, piked 7.5 meters. Four, 4.5, 5, 4.5, 3.5. Skylaux, City of Sheffield Diving Club, forward 1.5 somersaults, 1 twist, free position, 5 meters. 4.5, 5.5, 4.5, 2, 5.5. And finally, Sophie May Hancock, City of Sheffield Diving Club, back 2.5 somersaults, half twist, piked 10 meters.
Yes.
5, 4.5, 3.5, 5.5, 4.5. Thank you to the divers, coaches, team managers, officials, and volunteers. That concludes this second session of the 2024 Swim England Diving National Age Groups. Images from today's events are available through our official photographers, Will Johnston Photography.